This guy said that there is no proof of God.
Well, that guy is me, so this will be fun.
There are actually many. There is Noah's Ark.
That is a picture of a basalt rock formation, which is rather common in that particular area. It is not, in fact, a wooden structure covered by earth. The Turkish government has explored this area extensively since its discovery in the 60s. They knew about it long before Ron Wyatt discovered it in the mid-70s. It's been debunked about 400 times. It's baffling to me that these types of narratives are resurfacing now in the days of TikTok, when those of us who were around in the 90s already lived to see it get debunked all throughout the late 80s and early 90s. Not a single one of Ron Wyatt's discoveries has ever been validated by any outside source, and any news station that paid for coverage never actually got it. There have been multiple news stations and multiple funders for his projects that have been promised evidence of his claims and have failed to get any of that evidence, which is why the only evidence of any of Ron's claims comes from Ron himself and his ministry. There is no outside evidence for any of his claims, and in fact, anyone that's gone back and done follow-up explorations have discovered that his claims are bogus. Ron Wyatt did not find chariots or chariot parts at the bottom of any sea in the ancient Near East. He did not find the Ark of the Covenant. He did not find the blood of Jesus. He did not discover the crucifixion site of Jesus. He didn't discover any of the things he claimed to discover. He had about 100 different biblical discoveries. Based on that, this untrained, self-proclaimed archaeologist would have been the most successful biblical archaeologist of all time, except that all of his discoveries have been debunked by actual archaeologists. Moreover, the person who funded his last expedition for the Ark of the Covenant became so frustrated with his lack of proof, even though he had given him $30,000+ for the expedition, that when he came back asking for more money, he forced Ron to take a lie detector test, and you'll never guess, he failed miserably. Just Google the Ron Wyatt lie detector test. You'll figure it out.
There is the Euphrates River.
I'm not entirely sure how the Euphrates River is supposed to prove God exists. I'm assuming here that this is supposed to be a fulfillment of a prophecy that was not actually listed in the video. That being said, the Euphrates River floods and contracts on a regular basis. Any type of prediction based on the flooding of the river is no more prophecy than me saying it'll probably rain sometime next week because I live in an area where it rains all the time. Predicting something that is naturally occurring is not a prophecy.
And actually the most proof of God is you.
In fact, the modern human is the least likely proof that a God exists, as we have been able to map our DNA all the way back to the primates in which we came from. And the reason why we know this to be true is because of a thing called genetic scarring. As our DNA gets damaged, we can trace that particular damaged DNA throughout any type of species or even subspecies. And it turns out all human beings do share a couple pieces of damaged DNA. And it also turns out that some of those pieces of damaged DNA only show up in one other animal in the animal kingdom. And you guessed it, freaking primates. So yeah, we're just super evolved primates.
Creation needs a creator. You can't be created by nothing.
So I've covered this issue a number of times, including one video probably still pinned at the top of my profile. The fact that something came from nothing is a twofold problem. One, because we all know that something can't necessarily arise from nothing, at least from a philosophical standpoint that we can understand at this point in history. That being said, atheists don't believe that we came from nothing. Atheists don't believe that there was ever nothing. Nothing is just kind of a concept. We know from science that all matter is eternal. So there was never a point in which there was nothing. There was always something. And of course, that is both good and bad for your argument and for my argument, because that means you don't need to explain how a God arose from nothing, because there was never nothing. Now, I understand that this discussion between something and nothing is quite confusing because you think God is outside of matter, space, and time, so he can arise from nothing. The problem is that he is still something. So if God is something and there was once nothing, he would have had to arise out of nothing. But since atheists don't believe that nothing ever existed, you theists are more than welcome to borrow that particular philosophical point there and apply it to your deity. It gives me no pause to claim that you're allowed to use the same scientific truth that we're allowed to.
And the human body is so complex and complicated that it has to be created by a creator.
Yeah, I mean, in the atheist community, we just refer to this as the watchmaker fallacy. The assumption that something that is complicated demands a designer is utter nonsense. Of course, if we're going to apply this to the human and nothing else, this is easily debunked because we already know genetically that we are able to modify and reproduce, and then that certain changes within our DNA that might help us to survive a little bit better get passed on to our children. And so those of us that are genetically modified in a positive way reproduce more and more abundantly, and then that gene gets passed on more, whereas people that have negative DNA replications sometimes just don't survive at all. And that's how natural selection works. Now, there are two more wrinkles to this. The first is that you forget that we are millions and millions of years worth of evolution in our human DNA. So it's not hard for millions of years to produce something from, say, like an ape to a human being. But I understand your complaint. Your complaint, I'm sure, is that, well, the type of evolution that's required for, say, like the eyeball to evolve, it's so complicated. How could there be enough time for it? Yeah. As it turns out, we have discovered many animals that are in this transitional phase of evolution. A simple Google will pull that up. We know how eyeballs were evolved. We know how just about every feature of our human anatomy has evolved. Not every single one, but most of them. The only evolutionary question that is still sort of in process is the question of abiogenesis, and we're not going to address that in this short video. But mark my words, that doesn't help your case. Moreover, the watchmaker fallacy is kind of like a God of the gaps argument. The idea is basically because the theist doesn't understand the mechanism at which evolution can produce advanced life over a certain number of years, you just have to attribute it to God. So he's basically there to fill the gap of your knowledge. And of course, along with the other God of the gaps arguments, the problem is that the more we learn about science and the world, and the more better tools we get to investigate, the smaller and smaller and more invisible and further away your God gets.
Atheism makes no sense.
You mean it doesn't make sense to you? It makes perfect sense to me, actually. Now, I appreciate the fact that you made a video to address these points rather than arguing forever in the broken comment section of TikTok, which is just a deserted wasteland of terrible discussions. So I don't want you to think that I am attacking you in this particular video. I understand that my tone of voice and my manner of speaking sometimes makes it feel as though I'm attacking you. Just know that I do respect and appreciate everything you put into this video, even though I vehemently disagree with every point in it.